My mother-in-law told everyone I trapped her son with a baby. Then she saw my baby's latest photos and she broke down crying, begging me for another chance. His mother, Pette, had different ideas about our relationship from the very start. She believed Arlo could do better. She thought I wasn't pretty enough or successful enough or good enough for her perfect son. She smiled at me during family dinners, but I could feel her judging everything I said and did. Have you ever had someone actively try to destroy your life, your marriage, and even question if your own child is yours, just because they decided you weren't good enough for their son? Because I lived it. And honestly, for a long time, it felt like it was going to break me. It started subtly, these little paper cuts from Arlo's mom, Pette. She'd make comments about my job not paying enough, or my apartment being too small. My family? Not as established as theirs, apparently. She never said anything outright insulting, but the message was crystal clear. I was beneath her son, and she was just waiting for him to figure it out. Arlo, bless his heart, he'd defend me every single time. He'd tell her I was the love of his life, and she needed to accept that. She'd apologize, promise to try harder, then go right back to the subtle digs the next time we saw her. I learned to ignore it, mostly. I loved Arlo, and marrying him meant dealing with his mom. I figured things would get better after the wedding. Boy, was I wrong. They got so much worse. 2 years into our marriage, I got pregnant. Arlo was ecstatic. He literally cried when I showed him the positive test, then immediately started planning the nursery. He told everyone he knew he was going to be a father. He was just so genuinely excited, in a way that made me fall in love with him all over again. Pette's reaction? Different. So different. We announced the pregnancy at a family dinner. She didn't smile, didn't congratulate us. She just looked at me with these cold, calculating eyes and asked how far along I was. 8 weeks, I told her. She actually counted backward on her fingers, like she was trying to catch me in some kind of lie. Then she just said it was awfully convenient timing. Arlo asked what she meant. She said nothing and changed the subject. But that comment, that was just the beginning. After that dinner, Pette started telling other family members that I had trapped her son. She claimed I got pregnant on purpose to lock him into the marriage before he could change his mind. She said women like me used babies as insurance policies. She swore Arlo was too naive to see what I was doing, and someone needed to open his eyes. I found out because Arlo's cousin, bless her heart, mentioned it at my baby shower. She thought I already knew. She thought Arlo had already confronted his mother. He hadn't because he didn't know. Pette was careful, you see. She only spread her poison to people she thought wouldn't tell us. That night, I told Arlo everything. He was absolutely furious. He called his mother right then and there, demanding an explanation. She denied saying anything negative, of course. Said his cousin must have misunderstood. She'd never accused me of something so terrible, she insisted. She cried about being unfairly attacked. And somehow, by the end of the call, Arlo ended up apologizing to her for the confrontation. I couldn't believe it. Our daughter, Imogen, was born that spring. She came out looking exactly like Arlo. Same nose, same chin, that same unusual eye color that ran in his family. Even a tiny birthmark on her left shoulder, just like his. The nurses commented on it. The doctors joked that I did all the work and she came out his twin. Everyone who saw her said the same thing. Everyone, that is, except Pette. When she visited the hospital, she held our daughter for less than a minute before handing her back. She said the baby looked small. She said Imogen looked nothing like Arlo did as an infant. Then she added, with that casual cruelness only she possessed, sometimes babies look like one parent at first, but that changes as they grow. She was planting seeds of doubt, right there in a room full of people who could clearly see the resemblance. Over the next few months, her campaign escalated. She told extended family members she wasn't sure if the baby was really Arlo's. She suggested I might have cheated and passed off another man's child as his. She even went so far as to recommend Arlo get a paternity test before he got too attached. She said these things to aunts, uncles, and cousins, all while smiling sweetly at me during Sunday dinners. This time, Arlo heard about it from multiple relatives. Too many people reported the same comments for Pette to deny. When he confronted her again, she actually admitted she had concerns. She said a mother has a right to protect her son. She insisted the baby didn't look like him, no matter what everyone else claimed. She said she'd feel better if there was a test. And then came the real gut punch. "If you have nothing to hide," she said to me, "you should welcome the chance to prove me wrong." Arlo looked at his mother. Then he looked at our daughter, sleeping peacefully in my arms. Our daughter, who had his exact face. Our daughter, who everyone in the world could see was his child. He told his mother that if she needed a test to believe him, then she didn't trust him at all. He told her that demanding proof, when the evidence was sleeping right in front of her, showed she didn't want to be proven wrong. She wanted to be right more than she wanted a relationship with her grandchild. He told her that until she apologized to me sincerely and stopped spreading lies, she wasn't welcome in our home. Pette gasped. "You're choosing her over your own mother," she shrieked. Arlo, his voice calm but firm, replied, "I'm choosing my wife and my daughter over someone who can't accept them." She stormed out, I think expecting him to call her within days and take it all back. He didn't. Weeks passed, then months. With Arlo cutting off his mother, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. It felt lighter than anything we'd experienced since I got pregnant. Imagigen started doing these little things that made my heart feel too big for my chest. She'd grab at her toes and make these gurgling sounds that weren't quite laughs, but close enough. Arlo would come home from work, and she'd kick her legs when she heard his voice. We'd spend evenings on the floor with her between us, watching her discover her hands like they were the most amazing things in the world. Nobody was questioning whether she was really his daughter. Nobody was spreading lies about me. Nobody was making me feel like I had to prove myself every time I walked into a room. One Saturday morning, my mom came over, bags of groceries in hand, that determined look she gets when she's decided to take care of someone. She made breakfast while I fed Imagigen, then shooed me toward the shower while she cleaned up. When I came back, she had Imagigen on a blanket doing tummy time, making those encouraging sounds only grandmas make. I sat down next to them, just watching for a minute. My mom glanced over at me, and her face softened in that way that meant she was about to ask something I probably didn't want to answer. "How are you really doing with everything?" she asked. Not the surface answer I gave everyone else, but the truth. Something about the way she said it, so gentle and knowing, just broke something open in me. I started crying right there on the living room floor. Not pretty crying, either. The kind where your face gets all red, your nose runs, and you can't catch your breath properly. She pulled me against her shoulder and just let me sob, while Imagigen kicked happily on her blanket, completely unaware that her mom was falling apart 3 feet away. I told her I was so tired of being the villain in a story I didn't write. I did nothing wrong except fall in love with someone whose mother hated me, and somehow I became the bad guy. People still looked at me weird at family gatherings. Before we stopped going, that is. People still whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. Pette had poisoned so many people against me with her lies, and even though Arlo cut her off, I still felt the damage every single day. My mom held me tighter. She said Pette's lies said everything about Pette's character and nothing about mine. She said any reasonable person could look at Imagigen and see she was Arlo's daughter. The people who chose to believe accusations over evidence, they're not worth your tears, she said. She told me I was a good mother, a good wife, and Pette's jealousy and control issues were her problem to fix, not mine to carry. I cried harder because I needed to hear that so badly. Later that afternoon, after my mom left, Arlo's phone rang. It was his father, Stuart. I could hear the tension in Arlo's voice when he answered. He listened for a long time, his jaw getting tighter with each passing second. When he hung up, he looked angrier than I had seen him in weeks. Stuart had called to warn us that Pette was making the rounds with extended family members. She wasn't apologizing or taking responsibility for anything she'd said. Instead, she was positioning herself as the victim. She was telling people how hurt she was, how we were keeping her only grandchild away from her for no good reason. She was crying to aunts and uncles about how her son had chosen his wife over his own mother. She was, of course, conveniently leaving out every single thing she'd done to cause this situation. Arlo paced across the living room, his hands clenched into fists. "She still isn't getting it," he muttered. "She still thinks she's the wronged party." He recounted how she'd spent months accusing me of trapping him with a baby, months suggesting I'd cheated, months demanding paternity tests when our daughter had his exact face. And now she wanted sympathy because he'd finally set a boundary? I watched him pace, and something shifted in my chest. We'd been reactive this whole time, just responding to whatever Pette did next. Maybe it was time to be proactive. "We need to control the narrative," I said, before his mother twists it completely. Arlo stopped pacing and looked at me. "We should tell people exactly what happened," I continued. "Not the sanitized version, not the polite version. The truth about what his mother said and did." He thought about it for a minute, then nodded. He pulled out his phone and opened the family group chat. He spent 20 minutes typing, his thumbs moving fast across the screen. When he showed me what he'd written, it was detailed and clear. He explained exactly why we'd established boundaries with his mother. He listed the accusations she'd made about me trapping him. He detailed the lies she'd spread about my fidelity. He described her demand for paternity tests despite obvious evidence. He made it clear that this estrangement was a direct consequence of her choices and her refusal to apologize sincerely. He sent the message before either of us could second-guess it. The responses started coming in within minutes. Some family members expressed support and said they'd suspected Pette wasn't telling the whole truth. Others sent messages saying we should forgive family no matter what they do. A few said they had no idea things were that bad. Then Arlo's brother, River, texted back, and I watched Arlo's face turn bright red as he read it. River said we were being dramatic. He said Pette was just concerned, and mothers have a right to protect their sons. Arlo typed back fast, his fingers hitting the screen harder than necessary. He told River that their mother accused his wife of infidelity and entrapment, not concern. He said those were serious accusations that damaged my reputation with everyone who heard them. He added that River minimizing what happened showed exactly why they needed space from the whole family. The argument continued back and forth until Arlo finally muted the conversation and tossed his phone on the couch. 3 weeks later, something amazing happened. Imagigen started sleeping through the night. Not just once, but consistently, 7 to 8 hours straight. I woke up one morning feeling actually rested for the first time since she was born. I could think clearly again. I could function like a normal person. It felt like myself returning, bit by bit. I took her for her 6-month checkup on a Thursday morning. The pediatrician weighed her, measured her, did all the standard checks. She commented on how alert Imagigen was, how she tracked movement with her eyes and responded to sounds. She said Imagigen was healthy and developing perfectly. I felt this surge of pride sitting there in the exam room. Despite everything with Pette, despite the stress and the lies and the family drama, my daughter was thriving. I was doing something right. In the waiting room afterward, I was gathering up the diaper bag, getting ready to leave when someone said my name. I looked up and saw one of Arlo's distant cousins standing there. She had a baby carrier in one hand and looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She congratulated me on the baby, but she couldn't quite look me in the eye. Her gaze kept sliding away, to the side, to the floor, to the receptionist's desk. I realized immediately what was happening. She'd heard Pette's version of events and didn't know what to believe. I could see it in the way she stood too far away, in the way she kept the conversation surface level, in the way she couldn't meet my eyes when she asked how old Imagigen was now. Something clicked in me right there in that waiting room. I was done hiding. I was done feeling ashamed about lies someone else told. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. I walked closer to her and held out the phone, showing her recent pictures of Imagigen. The cousin looked down at the screen, and her whole face changed. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly. She looked from the photo to Imagigen in my arms and back to the photo. She said she didn't realize how much the baby looked like Arlo. She apologized for being weird, said she'd heard some things, but clearly they weren't true. She asked if she could see more pictures, and I showed her a dozen more, each one highlighting another feature Imagigen shared with her father. The cousin left looking embarrassed and thoughtful. That evening, after Imagigen went down for the night, I told Arlo about running into his cousin. I told him I was tired of Pette's lies still affecting how people treated me months later, tired of seeing doubt in people's eyes, tired of defending myself against accusations that should never have been made in the first place. Arlo listened, then suggested we start sharing more photos of Imagigen on social media and in the family group chat. He said we should let the visual evidence speak for itself. If people could see how much she looked like him, they'd realize Pette had been lying all along. We spent the next hour going through our photo gallery and selecting pictures. We chose ones that showed Imagigen's face clearly, ones that highlighted her eye color, ones where the resemblance to Arlo was impossible to miss. We created a shared album and sent it to the extended family with a simple message about wanting to share our daughter's first 6 months. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Family members started commenting within minutes. They pointed out identical features. She has Arlo's nose, his chin, his eyes, his expressions. They even posted old baby pictures of Arlo for comparison, and the similarities were striking. Several people sent private messages, apologizing for doubting, saying they should have known better than to believe the accusations. The album got shared beyond just our immediate circle. Cousins showed it to their parents. Aunts sent it to uncles. Within a day, it seemed like everyone in Arlo's extended family had seen the photos. The next afternoon, Arlo's sister, Jacqueline, texted me. She said the photos were circulating widely, and that several people were questioning why they ever believed Pette's accusations in the first place. Then she added something that made my stomach flip. She said Pette had seen the photos and became very emotional, but she didn't say what kind of emotional or what that meant. I didn't sleep well that night. Jacqueline's text kept running through my head. Pette had seen the photos and become very emotional. Was she crying because she realized how wrong she'd been? Or was she just upset about missing out on her granddaughter? The difference mattered. One showed actual remorse. The other just showed regret about consequences. 2 days later, Arlo's phone rang during dinner. He looked at the screen, and his whole body went stiff. He answered, and I heard Stuart's voice on the other end, loud enough that I could make out some words, even though Arlo didn't have it on speaker. Stuart said Pette had been crying constantly since seeing the recent pictures of Imagigen. He said she wanted to come over and talk. He said they could be there in 20 minutes if we just gave them a chance. Arlo looked at me across the table. I shook my head, almost imperceptibly. He told his father no. He said they weren't welcome in our home until his mother took real accountability for what she did. Stuart started arguing. Arlo cut him off. He said spreading lies about me to the entire family wasn't something that could be fixed with one conversation. He said his mother had months to apologize sincerely, and she chose to double down on her accusations instead. Stuart tried to play the sympathy card. Pette is suffering. Arlo's voice was sharp. I suffered too, Dad, when your wife told everyone I was a cheater who trapped him with someone else's baby. The call ended badly. Arlo sat there staring at his plate. Imagigen made a happy noise from her bouncer, and he didn't even look up. The next few days were rough. Arlo went to work and came home looking exhausted. He'd hold Imagigen for long stretches without saying much. I could see the stress piling up on him. His shoulders stayed tight. His jaw stayed clenched. He barely ate dinner. On Thursday, he came home 2 hours late. I'd already fed Imagigen and put her down for the night. He walked in the door and just stood there in the hallway. I asked what happened. He said a major project at work failed. His boss blamed him, even though the failure wasn't his fault. He said he'd spent the afternoon in meetings, getting torn apart for someone else's mistakes. I hugged him, and he just leaned against me like he was too tired to hold himself up. We sat on the couch, and he pulled Imagigen's baby blanket onto his lap. He held it and stared at nothing. I made him tea. He drank it cold an hour later because he forgot it was there. That night in bed, Arlo finally spoke. He said he'd been thinking about his mom more lately. He asked if we were being too harsh by maintaining complete no contact. My stomach dropped. I felt panic rise up in my chest because I wasn't ready to let Pette back into our lives. But I also didn't want to be the reason Arlo was suffering. I asked what he meant. He said maybe we could consider letting his parents visit if his mother apologized. He admitted the estrangement was affecting him more than he expected. He said he missed his mom, even though he was still angry at her. I sat up in bed. I reminded him that his mother spent months telling people I trapped him. I reminded him she suggested I cheated and that Imagigen wasn't his. I reminded him she recommended he get a paternity test. Like our daughter's face wasn't proof enough. He said he knew all that. He wasn't trying to excuse what she did. He was just struggling with the whole situation. We argued. It was our first real fight about his mother since he cut her off. Arlo said maybe we could do supervised visits if she gave a proper apology. I said her tears over photos didn't erase months of calling me a liar. I said crying because she missed her granddaughter wasn't the same as being sorry for destroying my reputation. He said he understood that, but maybe we could at least hear her out. I got out of bed. I told him his mother hadn't actually done anything to earn forgiveness yet. I said she was sad about consequences, but that didn't mean she understood the harm she caused. He said I was right, but he was tired of being caught between his wife and his mother. I said I was tired of being painted as the villain for protecting myself and our daughter from someone who spread vicious lies about me. We went back and forth. Neither of us raised our voices because Imagigen was sleeping in the next room, but the anger was there, sharp and real between us. I slept on the couch that night. In the morning, Arlo came out and sat next to me. He apologized. He said he wasn't trying to pressure me. He was just struggling with missing his mom while also being angry at her. The stress from work was making everything feel harder. I told him I understood. I knew this situation was hurting him. I said I didn't want to be the reason he lost his relationship with his mother. He took my hand. He said any reconciliation would require genuine accountability from Pette, not just sadness about consequences, but real acknowledgement of what she did and why it was wrong. He said I got final say on when and if she met Imagigen. He said my comfort and safety mattered more than his mother's feelings. We sat there holding hands while the morning light came through the windows. I felt the tightness in my chest ease a little. Later that week, Natasha took me out for coffee. Arlo stayed home with Imagigen. I just needed to get out of the house. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't emotionally connected to Pette. We sat in a corner booth, and I told her everything. The phone call from Stuart, Arlo asking if we were being too harsh, our argument, and how guilty I felt for maintaining boundaries. Natasha listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Listen," she said. "Pette accused you of entrapment and infidelity to anyone who would listen. She tried to convince Arlo to get a paternity test for a baby who obviously belonged to him. Protecting yourself and your daughter from that toxicity isn't cruel. Pette created this situation entirely on her own. You don't owe forgiveness to someone who spent months trying to destroy your reputation and your marriage." I felt tears building up, and she passed me napkins. "Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting toxic people walk all over you," she continued. "Boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection." I went home feeling more grounded. Arlo and I sat down after Imagigen went to sleep. We had a calmer conversation about what accountability would actually look like from his mother. We agreed it meant a direct apology to me, not through other family members, not through crying phone calls. A real, face-to-face apology where she acknowledged the specific harm she caused. We agreed it meant changed behavior over time, not just one conversation where she said sorry and expected everything to go back to normal. We agreed she needed to correct the lies she spread, tell the same people who heard her accusations that she was completely wrong. We wrote it all down. Clear expectations. No room for misunderstanding. Arlo said he'd communicate these requirements to his parents. If his mother wasn't willing to meet them, then the estrangement would continue. Arlo sent a text message to his father that evening. He made it clear that a written apology, acknowledging specific harm, was the first step, not a guarantee of immediate reconciliation, just the first step. Stuart responded an hour later. He said they thought we were being unreasonable. He said demanding a written apology was excessive and formal. He said Pette had already admitted she was wrong, and we were punishing her by making her jump through hoops. Arlo read the message out loud to me. Then he typed back that if a sincere apology was too much to ask, they could continue the estrangement. He said we weren't interested in half measures or fake reconciliation. Stuart didn't respond after that. 2 weeks passed with no letter. I started to think Pette's breakdown was just about her own feelings of missing out, not genuine remorse about what she did to me. She was sad about not knowing her granddaughter, but she wasn't actually sorry for calling me a liar and destroying my reputation with her accusations. Arlo seemed both relieved and disappointed. I could tell he was hoping his mother would step up. He wanted to believe she was capable of real accountability. But as the days went by with nothing from her, he started accepting that maybe she wasn't. We stopped talking about it as much. Life went back to normal routines. Imagigen learned to roll over from her back to her stomach. We celebrated that milestone without thinking about Pette at all. Then a letter arrived in the mail on a Tuesday afternoon. I recognized the return address immediately. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The paper inside was nice stationery with Pette's name printed at the top. Her handwriting covered 3 full pages. I sat down on the couch before I started reading. The letter detailed every accusation she made against me. She wrote about telling family members I trapped Arlo with a pregnancy. She wrote about suggesting I cheated and passed off another man's child as his. She wrote about recommending a paternity test when Imagigen's resemblance to Arlo was obvious to everyone. She admitted she was wrong about all of it. She acknowledged that she tried to turn family against me because she didn't think I was good enough for her son. She wrote that she felt threatened by how much Arlo loved me and how complete our little family seemed without her input or approval. The letter included an apology for questioning Imagigen's paternity when the resemblance was obvious to everyone. She wrote that she was looking for reasons to be right rather than accepting the truth. She admitted she wanted me to be wrong about everything because it would prove her initial judgment of me was correct. She wrote that seeing recent photos made her realize she'd missed months of her granddaughter's life because of her own pride and cruelty. She said she was ashamed of herself. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but she needed me to know she was wrong about me from the very beginning. The words sat heavy on the paper in my hands. I read the letter 3 times. Parts of it felt real. Parts of it felt like what someone would write if they knew what they were supposed to say. Words are easy. Change behavior is what actually matters. I carried the letter to the kitchen, where Arlo was feeding Imagigen mashed sweet potatoes. He looked up when I walked in, and I handed him the pages without saying anything. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and started reading. I watched his face change as he went through each paragraph. His eyes got wet, his jaw tightened. When he finished, he set the letter down carefully on the counter and just stared at it for a long moment. That's the most accountable I've ever seen my mother be about anything, he said, his voice quiet. She's never admitted being wrong so completely before. Maybe she's actually capable of change. I told him I wanted to believe that, but we needed to be careful. He agreed immediately. He said we couldn't just let her back into our lives because she wrote a good apology. We needed to see if she meant it through her actions over time. We sat at the kitchen table after Magijan went down for her nap and talked through what came next. The letter was a good first step, but we weren't ready for in-person contact yet. We needed to see if Pette would actually do the work of rebuilding trust, or if this was just another manipulation. Arlo called his mother that evening. I sat next to him on the couch, so I could hear both sides of the conversation. He told her we received the letter and appreciated the apology. He said rebuilding trust would take time and require her to demonstrate changed behavior with family members. There was silence on the other end for several seconds. Then Pette said she understood. She said she would do whatever it took. She said she knew she'd destroyed any right to immediate forgiveness, and she accepted that. Her voice sounded different than I'd ever heard it. Smaller, less certain. Arlo asked her to start correcting the lies she'd spread about me with every family member who'd heard them. He said if she was serious about making amends, she needed to actively repair the damage she'd done to my reputation. Pette agreed without arguing. That surprised both of us. She asked if she could send a gift for Magijan. Arlo looked at me, and I thought about it for a moment before nodding. He told his mother she could send something small to our address. The call ended shortly after that. We sat together in the quiet of our living room, and I felt strange. Not relieved exactly, not hopeful, just less tense than I'd been in months. A week passed, and Magijan learned to clap her hands together, and we celebrated like she'd won an award. Life continued in its normal rhythm of feedings and naps and laundry. Then a package arrived. The return address was Pette's. I opened it carefully on the kitchen counter while Arlo watched over my shoulder. Inside was a baby blanket in soft yellow yarn with white edging. The stitching was neat and careful, handmade. There was also a children's book about a family of rabbits. A note card sat on top. Pette had written that she made the blanket herself and hoped Magijan would use it. She said she remembered Arlo loving soft blankets as a baby and thought Magijan might too. The gesture felt more personal than expensive gifts would have been. It felt like actual effort instead of just money. I ran my fingers over the blanket's texture and felt something shift slightly in my chest. Not forgiveness, not trust, just a small softening toward the idea that reconciliation might eventually be possible. Arlo spread the blanket over Magijan during her next nap. She grabbed the edge of it in her tiny fist and pulled it close to her face. I took a photo of her sleeping with it and saved it to my phone without sending it to anyone. 2 days later, Arlo's father, Stuart, called Arlo. I was washing bottles in the sink when Arlo answered and put it on speaker. Stuart said he needed to tell us something. He said Pette had been actively correcting family members who still believed her old accusations. She was telling them she was completely wrong about me. She was saying she damaged a good person's reputation because of her own issues. Stuart said he'd heard this from 3 different relatives independently. He said Pette wasn't just apologizing in private to us. She was doing the public work of fixing what she'd broken. This information mattered. It showed changed behavior beyond just writing us a nice letter. It showed she was willing to be uncomfortable and admit fault to people who might judge her for it. Arlo thanked Stuart for letting us know. After he hung up, I stood at the sink with my hands in soapy water and tried to figure out how I felt. I called Natasha that afternoon. We met at the coffee shop near my apartment while Arlo stayed home with Magijan. I told her everything about the letter, the blanket, and Stuart's call. I asked if I was being too cautious or not cautious enough. Natasha stirred sugar into her coffee and looked at me seriously. She said protecting my daughter from someone who spent months calling her mother a cheater and a liar was reasonable. She reminded me that Pette didn't just insult me privately. She tried to convince an entire family that I'd trapped her son and passed off another man's baby as his. She said I got to control the terms of any reconciliation and that making Pette earn back trust was appropriate. I drove home feeling more settled in my boundaries. That evening, Arlo and I sat down at the dining table with a notebook. We wrote out specific conditions for any future contact with Pette. She could never badmouth me to family again. Visits would be supervised. She had to respect our parenting decisions without criticism. The first sign of her old behavior meant immediate return to no contact. We wrote everything down in clear language. We both signed it at the bottom. Arlo scanned the document and emailed a copy to his parents. Stuart called back within an hour. He said the conditions were excessive. He said we were treating Pette like a criminal when she'd already apologized. Arlo told his father that these were non-negotiable terms, and if they couldn't accept them, the estrangement would continue. Then Pette's voice came through the phone. She must have taken it from Stuart. She told him to be quiet. She said she accepted all the conditions without reservation. She asked when she might be able to meet Imagigen in person. Arlo said we needed at least another month of demonstrated good behavior before we'd consider it. Pette agreed. During that month, updates came through Jacqueline. Pette was correcting her past lies with extended family. She was working on herself. Jacqueline even reported that Pette had started seeing a therapist to work on her controlling behavior and pride issues. The information felt like genuine effort, like maybe Pette was actually trying to change instead of just saying the right words to get what she wanted. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Pette to get impatient or defensive or demanding. But the weeks passed and she stayed consistent. She sent brief updates through Jacqueline about her therapy sessions. She didn't push for faster reconciliation. She didn't make excuses or minimize what she'd done. I started to think that maybe seeing those photos of Imagigen had actually broken something open in her. Maybe missing months of her granddaughter's life had finally made her face what her pride had cost her. My mom showed up the following weekend with her usual bags of groceries and a container of soup she'd made the night before. I met her at the door with Imagigen on my hip, and she immediately took the baby from me and started making those grandmother noises that always made Imagigen smile. She carried her granddaughter into the kitchen while I brought in the groceries, and by the time I joined them, she'd already settled into a chair with Imagigen in her lap, examining her tiny fingers like they held secrets. I heated up the soup while she played with the baby, and we ate lunch together at the kitchen table with Imagigen between us and her bouncer. After we finished eating, I told her about Pette's letter and everything it said. I explained the conditions Arlo and I had written out and how we'd sent them to his parents. I described Stuart's reaction and how Pette had accepted everything without argument. My mom listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her face serious but not surprised. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said she was proud of me for standing firm on boundaries, while leaving room for reconciliation if Pette proved herself. She reminded me that protecting myself and Imagigen had to come first, always. Then she warned me to watch carefully for any signs of Pette's old patterns returning, because people could say the right words without actually changing their behavior. She told me to trust my instincts and never let guilt override my judgment about what was safe for my daughter. I felt something settle in my chest hearing her say that, because sometimes I just needed someone to confirm I wasn't being unreasonable or cruel. 6 weeks crawled by with Pette maintaining her good behavior through Jacqueline's reports. She kept correcting her lies with family members. She kept going to therapy. She sent one brief note through Jacqueline asking if we'd received the blanket and hoping Imagigen liked it. But she didn't push for more contact or complain about the timeline. Arlo and I talked about it multiple times during those weeks, always circling back to the same question. Was his mother genuinely changing or just performing change to get what she wanted? Finally, we agreed to try a supervised meeting at the park, 3 blocks from our apartment. The location felt safe because we could leave immediately if things went wrong, and it was neutral territory where Pette couldn't corner us or make a scene. Jacqueline offered to come along as a buffer, and we accepted because having a witness made the whole thing feel less dangerous. She promised to stay nearby, but give us space, ready to step in if Pette showed any sign of her old behavior. We scheduled it for the following Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, giving ourselves the whole day to recover afterward if we needed it. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my head, imagining all the ways Pet might react to seeing Imagigen in person. Would she be able to hide her resentment toward me? Would she say something passive-aggressive that sounded innocent but carried her old venom? Would she try to take Imagigen from my arms and claim some grandmother right to hold her first? Every time I started drifting off, another worry would jolt me awake, and I'd find myself staring at the ceiling in the dark. Arlo woke up around 3 o'clock in the morning and found me sitting up in bed. He pulled me back down against his chest and wrapped his arms around me. He promised we would leave immediately if his mother showed any sign of her old behavior. He reminded me that I was in control of this meeting and that Pet only got to see Imagigen because I was allowing it. His voice was steady and certain in the darkness, and I finally fell asleep around 4 with his hand rubbing slow circles on my back. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. We got Imagigen ready and packed her diaper bag with extra supplies, even though we'd only be gone an hour. Arlo loaded the stroller into the car while I buckled Imagigen into her car seat, and neither of us said much during the short drive to the park. Jacqueline was already there when we arrived, sitting on a bench near the playground with a coffee cup in her hands. She waved when she saw us, but didn't approach, letting us get Imagigen out of the car and settled in the stroller at our own pace. The park was busy with other families enjoying the spring weather. Kids running around the playground equipment, parents pushing swings. It felt surreal to be meeting Pet in this normal, cheerful place after months of estrangement. We walked slowly toward the meeting spot, and that's when I saw her. Pet was sitting alone on a bench near the fountain, wearing a simple blue sweater I'd never seen before. She looked smaller, somehow older. Her shoulders curved forward, like she was trying to make herself less noticeable. When she saw us approaching with the stroller, she stood up quickly but didn't move toward us. Her hand went to her mouth, and even from a distance, I could see her eyes filling with tears. She started crying before we even reached her, and my whole body went tense. I couldn't tell if these were manipulative tears meant to make us feel guilty or genuine emotion from seeing her granddaughter for the first time in months. We stopped about 10 feet away from her, and Arlo's hand found mine. Pet stayed where she was, still crying but not approaching, and I realized she was waiting for permission. Arlo cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, his voice a little strained, "you can come closer to see Imagigen." She walked toward us carefully, like she was afraid we'd change our minds and run. When she reached the stroller, she knelt down beside it instead of standing over it, putting herself at Imagigen's level. She just looked at our daughter for a long moment without saying anything. Imagigen was awake and alert, her unusual eyes tracking the movement of other kids in the park. Pet's hand hovered near the stroller handle, but didn't touch it. Then she spoke, her voice rough from crying. "Imagigen is beautiful," she whispered. She said Imagigen looked exactly like Arlo did as a baby, the same nose and chin and eyes. There was no defensiveness in her voice when she said it, no hint of the woman who'd insisted for months that the resemblance didn't exist, just sadness and what sounded like regret. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of the woman who'd accused me of trapping her son. I looked for the subtle digs disguised as compliments, the passive-aggressive comments about my parenting, the cold judgment in her eyes when she looked at me. But Pet seemed genuinely humbled and ashamed as she knelt by the stroller. She looked up at me after a moment, tears still running down her face. "I am so sorry," she choked out, "for everything I put you through. I was wrong about you from the very start, from the first family dinner when I decided you weren't good enough for my son. I understand if you never fully forgive me, because what I'd done, it was unforgivable." Her voice broke on that last word, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of believing she might actually mean what she was saying. Arlo asked his mother why she spread those lies about me, his voice harder than I had heard it in weeks. Pette stayed kneeling by the stroller, but turned to look at him. She admitted she felt like she was losing control of her son's life and couldn't accept that he'd chosen someone without her approval. She said she'd spent his whole childhood imagining the woman he'd marry, someone from their social circle with the right family background. And when he brought me home instead, she couldn't let go of that fantasy. She said the pregnancy made it real in a way she couldn't deny anymore. So she tried to create doubt about me and about Imagigen, because if she could make everyone else question my character, maybe she could convince herself she'd been right all along. She said seeing how much Imagigen looked like Arlo in those recent photos forced her to confront that she'd been lying to herself and everyone else because of her own insecurity and need for control. Her hands were shaking as she spoke, and I could see the effort it took for her to say these things out loud. The visit lasted about 40 minutes. Pette kept appropriate distance the whole time, never trying to hold Imagigen without permission or reach into the stroller to touch her. She asked thoughtful questions about the baby's development, when she started sleeping through the night, whether she was eating well, if she'd started teething yet. She complimented my parenting when I answered, saying I was clearly doing an amazing job because Imagigen looked so healthy and happy. There were no passive-aggressive digs hidden in her words, no subtle implications that I was doing something wrong. When Imagigen started fussing, Pette stepped back to give me space to pick her up and comfort her. She watched me settle the baby against my shoulder, and something in her face looked almost wistful. I started to believe she might actually be capable of change, that the therapy and time away from us had broken something open in her. As we prepared to leave, gathering up the diaper bag and getting ready to put Imagigen back in the stroller, Pette asked if we might consider another visit in a few weeks. Her voice was hesitant, like she was afraid of pushing too hard. Arlo looked at me for the decision, and I appreciated that he was letting me control this. I thought about the last 40 minutes, how Pette had respected every boundary we'd set, how she'd stayed at a distance and waited for permission for everything. I told her we could try monthly supervised visits for now. I explained that if she continued respecting our boundaries and treating me with respect, we could gradually increase contact over time. I made it clear that this was conditional and that any return to her old behavior would mean immediate return to no contact. Pette thanked me with genuine gratitude in her voice. She said she knew she had to earn back our trust and that she was willing to do whatever it took, for however long it took. She didn't try to hug me or push for more than I was offering. She didn't ask to hold Imagigen or suggest we come to her house for the next visit. She just accepted what I'd said and thanked us for giving her this chance. She stood back while we got Imagigen settled in the stroller, and she was still standing there watching us when we walked away. For the first time since I'd met her, Pette had truly respected my boundaries without trying to negotiate or manipulate her way around them. On the drive home, Imagigen fell asleep in her car seat within minutes. Arlo reached over and squeezed my hand while keeping his eyes on the road. He asked how I was feeling about everything. I told him I was cautiously optimistic, but still watching for any sign of Pette slipping back into her old patterns. He nodded and said he understood my caution completely. Then he told me he was proud of how I handled the meeting. He said my willingness to give his mother a chance, even with all the strict conditions, meant everything to him. I looked out the window. I wasn't doing it for Pette, I said. I was doing it for you, and for Imagigen, because you both deserve the chance at having a grandmother if she can actually change. He squeezed my hand tighter and didn't say anything else for the rest of the drive. Over the next 2 months, we scheduled 3 more supervised visits with Pette at the same park. Each visit went smoothly without any problems. Pette maintained respectful behavior the entire time and never once criticized me or questioned our parenting choices. She brought small, thoughtful gifts for Imagigen at each visit: a soft stuffed rabbit, a set of board books, a musical toy that played gentle lullabies. She always asked permission before taking photos of Imagigen. She stayed at whatever distance we indicated was appropriate. She complimented how well Imagigen was developing without making it sound like a surprise. When Imagigen started crawling between visits, Pette celebrated the milestone with genuine excitement and no comments about whether she was early or late compared to Arlo as a baby. She was showing us, through consistent actions, that she understood she was on probation and couldn't afford any mistakes. Stuart called Arlo one evening to tell us something interesting he'd noticed at a family gathering. Extended family members had been commenting on the change in Pette's behavior and attitude. She'd been consistently correcting the record about me whenever anyone brought up the old accusations. When someone mentioned the paternity concerns at a cousin's birthday party, Pette immediately shut it down and told them she'd been completely wrong about everything. She apologized to the whole group for spreading lies about me and said I was a wonderful mother and wife. Stuart said several relatives were shocked because they'd never heard Pette admit she was wrong about anything before. After Stuart's call, several relatives reached out to me directly to apologize for believing Pette's lies. I accepted their apologies while mentally noting who had stood by me from the beginning and who had needed proof before changing their minds. Arlo and I celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary on a quiet evening at home with Imagigen between us on the couch. She was playing with her feet and making happy babbling sounds. Arlo put his arm around me and pulled me close. He told me that watching me stand firm on boundaries while still allowing room for his mother's redemption showed him what real strength looks like. Our relationship with Pette would probably never be warm or close the way some families are, but we'd established a new dynamic where I controlled all the terms, and she respected my authority as Imagigen's mother. Our little family stayed protected while allowing supervised grandmother visits that might gradually become less tense over time. I kissed Arlo and looked down at our daughter. She had his eyes and his smile, and absolutely no doubt about where she came from. And you know what? That was enough for me. So tell me, have you ever had to draw such a hard line with a family member who was trying to hurt you? What did you do? I'd really love to hear your experiences in the comments below.